Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting, Board of Appeals meeting, and Committee of the Whole meeting. These meetings, or the council meeting, I should say, are called to order. I kindly ask our city clerk to take the roll.
Bruno.
Here.
Burkhart.
Here.
Clements.
Here.
Ruby.
Here.
Haven.
Here.
Gilbert.
Here.
Elijah.
Here.
Marks.
Here.
McGowan.
Here.
Swanson.
Here.
We have a full house this evening. We begin our council meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Mr. Mulrow to please lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, and for those of you tuning in on either Channel 10 or Channel 99, I emailed the City Council late yesterday afternoon regarding some sad news, and that is about the death of Mr. Michael Donahue, a Geneva native, a 1979 Geneva High School graduate, the former Community Development Director for this city. He also worked for a brief period of time for the Northern Illinois Planning Commission, which was the predecessor of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency on Planning. He served with distinction on the Kane County Board of Commissioners. And perhaps most interesting is he also was the impetus behind the Prairie Green Preserve here in Geneva. Those hundreds of acres west of Peck Road that are now forever open space was really Mike's idea. He also spearheaded and deserves all the credit for the redevelopment of Settlers Hill landfill, which is currently under development to become a nationally ranked championship-level cross-country course. For those of you who knew Mike, I trust you would agree that he had a bigger-than-life personality. His physical presence was only matched by his extraordinary generosity and his extraordinary support of others, in particular those who perhaps had larger and greater struggles than he and his family did. He and his wife, Carol, were chairman of the annual Top Hat Ball for Mark Lund for a number of years. Mike served as vice president of an organization in Naples, Florida, the Freedom Waters Foundation, where they provided opportunities for veterans and special needs individuals to enjoy boating. And no matter what Mike and Carol did, particularly when they were hosting a party, there was never a party hosted by the Donahues that was not for some other organization. They partied with a purpose, if you will. Mike announced his diagnosis with ALS in January of 2018, and ALS claimed his life this past Friday, December 12, at the tender age of 58. We send Carol our love, we send their son Robert and their daughter Allison our love as well, and I trust that all of you would also echo that there's an extraordinary loss in this community, throughout Kane County, and of course in southwestern Florida. So if I could begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Changing gears, ladies and gentlemen, item 3A is to administer the oath of office for a new police officer, Mr. Brennan Mulrow. Mr. Mulrow, you met the city clerk earlier. Now's your chance to come up and say hello to the city council and the community that's tuning in. On average, we get about 11 viewers a night. So this is your chance to shine. And first and foremost, introduce all the guests who are with you tonight. You have quite the fan club. Your older brother, Colin. We clarified that earlier. Is it fair to say Officer Mulrow? Well, almost, but what the heck, we're going to do it anyways. Soon to be Officer Mulrow, I conferred with the city attorney prior to you stepping up there, and he assured me that I was not stalking you.
You were not.
Nor is it,
Ghosting.
Nor is I,
doing neither.
yeah. But I did check out your Facebook page. And this is just frightening. Please explain to me, there's a picture of you playing football wearing number 60. That's with St. Francis University?
Yeah, and my senior year.
Your senior year of high school. What position did you play?
I played left tackle.
Left tackle. Is that better than right tackle, or is that just,
Well, if you got a right-handed quarterback to the blind side.
I don't know what that means. What's that mean? Sounds impressive, though. And this photo is you and Julia.
It is, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Now, there's another photo on here that has a date of 4/16/16. What's that all about?
I don't know.
Well, it's you and I don't know. Actually, maybe that's not Julia. Who's that?
Not touching it.
No? Okay, enough of that, man. You might want to amend your Facebook page. You are the first police officer in your family. Julia explained that your father or father-in-law? Father, brother-in-law, and sister are all police officers. Why did you choose this profession?
Well, I decided that I wanted to get in this career path before I actually got through that in our family. And then being around meeting more people in the field really kind of helped push me to decide this is what I wanted to do.
Born in Joliet, raised in New Lenox. You've lived most of your life in New Lenox.
Yeah.
Have those been the best years of your life?
Oh, of course.
Lincoln Way West High School.
Yeah.
What's the nickname for Lincoln Way West?
West?
They're called the Westies?
We are the Warriors.
Oh, the Warriors, okay. Lincoln Way West Warriors. University of St. Francis. You play all 4 years there?
Yeah, I redshirted, so I did the 5th year.
Oh, is that right? That's cool. And how was your experience both on and off the field at St. Francis?
I liked it a lot. I got to meet a lot of people.
Yeah?
Got to work with like JPD, Joliet police officers.
Oh, that's cool.
And got to meet a lot of good people there.
So early in your college career, you knew you wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah, so when I started school, I went to school for criminal justice.
Okay.
And then I picked up a second major, political science too.
This gentleman behind you is actually, we've never seen him before. We don't know.
Try that. I can hear you.
Should we start over? Yeah, good Lord. But right away, you knew. This is, you said this was prior to meeting Julia, because you and Julia
Yeah.
met at St. Francis.
We met our freshman year, we were friends, and then we became more than friends our sophomore year. So, but I knew kind of coming in out of high school, I was interested in it. I took some classes in high school. We had some elective classes, and there was one like kind of involving law, and I just found it interesting, which made the classes a lot easier.
Now, we were talking before the meeting that your eligibility rank was high in multiple communities.
Yeah, there was a few. I was testing a lot of places, following the advice of Julia's dad, telling me to just test everywhere and as much as I could, and eventually something would work out.
So what do you know about Geneva that you want to share with everyone as to what perhaps made your decision best for our community?
I just, looking into the town, and I just like that as a smaller town. It's a tight-knit town. I like the community aspect. It seems like it's a close-knit community here, and you guys work a lot with the police.
It's interesting that you reference small town, because later in the agenda, we're actually annexing St. Charles.
Well,
You want to change your opinion or
I mean,
Good? Okay. I'm a big sports fan, says Mr. Mulrow, especially football. Other hobbies I have include working out, which I do 4 to 5 times a week. No kidding.
yeah.
Why?
I don't know. I like it. I mean, it's a good stress reliever.
Are you
Feel
a
good
weights
after
guy? Are
work?
you cardio? You both?
Mostly weights.
Mostly
I
weights?
do some cardio too, but weights is my thing.
Weights is your thing. I enjoy spending time with my friends. That's plural.
Yeah.
and family, or trying new restaurants we haven't been to before? What's your favorite food, man?
Probably steak.
Steak?
Pizza.
Steak and pizza. I enjoy staying active, and your newest hobby is rock climbing.
Yeah, my brother's girlfriend actually got us into it, and we started a couple months now. I've been going to like a rock climbing gym.
That's not easy.
No, it's not. We took a class, and the instructor pointed out how I was the biggest one there.
Is that a compliment?
I don't know. He guessed my weight and guessed about 50 pounds shy, so I'll take it as a compliment.
Your natural strength through weightlifting, does that help you, or is it a different kind of strength?
It's kind of a different kind of strength because everybody else, all the professional rock climbers are like 150 pounds, and I'm probably 100 pounds more than that.
Do you know who Jack Kerouac is?
No, I do not.
You know who he is? Who knows? Or he was, yeah. See, look at that. Yeah, I think I got the name wrong. I'm thinking of the other guy who wrote the book Into Thin Air, John Krakauer. You ever read that book?
No.
Into Thin Air? It's about climbing Everest.
No, I didn't read that.
It's actually mandatory for our new officers. When you go to the landfill, it's required. I enjoy watching movies. What's your favorite genre?
Probably action or action thrillers.
And TV shows. Favorite TV show? You don't have to have one. I'm just
Game
curious.
of Thrones?
Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
That's good stuff? Is it?
It's pretty popular, yeah.
I like to play video games as well. Fortnite?
No,
No?
not a Fortnite player.
Pong?
No, that was before my time.
Before my time, said the new officer.
3 decades, probably.
Said the new officer. How do you like midnight shifts? For the rest of your career. Anything else you want to share, soon-to-be officer? With all due respect, we are absolutely delighted. We're thrilled. I know the chief and others, the commanders, and everyone speaks extraordinarily highly of you. We are honored that you chose our community. Message you want to convey to anyone else tuning in tonight regarding a career in law enforcement?
I mean, I don't really know a lot yet, kind of just getting started, but I'm anxious to start, and I'm looking forward to a career in this. But I mean, anybody that wants to do it, I'd say go for it.
That's awesome. I know Mom and Dad and Grandma and Grandpa are very proud, and of course Julia and the older brother. So the floor is yours. You are obviously welcome to invite anyone and everyone you wish to join you as the clerk administers the oath of office. Okay?
All right. Everybody hear me? Good. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Brennan Mulrow, having been appointed to the position of police officer in the city of Geneva, county of Kane aforesaid, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, the Geneva Code of Ordinances, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the position of police officer according to the best of my ability. Now you're an officer. Congratulations.
And Officer Mulrow, we know that you and your family probably have a celebratory evening ahead, so by all means, feel free to sneak out. Are you heading out for a steak dinner by chance, or?
Pizza.
Whatever you want. That's good. There's a nice place down the street, Millrace Inn. You may have heard of it. There's no waiting, there's no roof.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next item of business is a presentation via introduction regarding the fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 budgets by our city administrator, Ms. Stephanie Dawkins. Ms. Dawkins, the floor is yours.
So I have to thank Mr. Mayor, first of all, because now I have that song, Hey Jack Kerouac, running through my
I know,
head.
sorry, my apologies for that.
So I'm going to be like ready to, Hey Jack Kerouac, I think of my brother. Okay, anyhow.
Pete, please edit the tape.
That sets the tone for tonight, hopefully. So this evening, I'm just giving you kind of a very high-level overview of the upcoming fiscal 21 and 22 budgets. As you will recall, we've started this kind of two-year budgeting process, so really, we're on year 2 that we talked about last year, so now it's year 1. So it's really kind of just a refresher. So tonight is, again, really high-level, just to prepare you for what you will see when you actually get the budget documents. So, I look at it kind of like a trailer to a movie or coming soon, except there's no spoiler alerts because you kind of already know what to expect. So, we traditionally begin our budget process with strategic planning. We do that in early November, and it's at this meeting that the City Council, the SPAC chair, and the senior management team come together to discuss the strategic plan and outline priorities for the upcoming year. So the slide on the screen, I'm not going to read it all to you, illustrates the differences between strategic planning and budgeting. But while these two concepts are very different, they are very much interrelated. An organization needs to have both a strategic plan and a budget. The strategic plan lays out the direction and the goals of the organization and guidelines for actions to achieve those goals. And budgeting, on the other hand, is only part of the strategic planning process. A budget is first a forecast of all income and expenses, and helps an organization identify future financial needs and plan based on expected revenue, expenses, and debt obligations. If an organization doesn't have the budget to support its strategic plan, then the organization needs to either modify its plan or find the financial means to support the plan. So there's a cyclical relationship to strategic planning and budgeting, as this slide illustrates. We start with strategic planning, then we move on to operational planning, so what we're doing in our day-to-day work. We get to budgeting, which you see there's a big arrow, because that's where we're at now. Controlling, measuring, and then we look at reporting, we look at analysis, we look at feedback, and then we go right back to strategic planning. So it's kind of a continuum, and you might move back and forth, but they're all interrelated, and we're constantly in motion. So we're constantly looking at that strategic plan, constantly revisiting, getting our feedback, reprioritizing, and then on an annual basis or biannual basis doing budgeting. So first, I'd like to talk about context, and we're going to focus most of my discussion tonight on the general fund. I select the general fund because, as you all are aware, that's mainly supported through sales, property, and income taxes, and therefore that's the fund that gets all of the attention. That's the glamour fund. It's the police department, it's the fire department, it's public works, and then, of course, administration stuff. So the first step for staff in formulating a budget recommendation is to take a look at revenues and revenue forecasts. I would like to start the conversation by stating that the city is in good financial position. I did choose my green shirt for Christmas over my red shirt to again indicate that we are in a good financial position. Although we are only just halfway through the current fiscal year, we are anticipating a fund balance of roughly 35 to 40% at the end of the year. Keep in mind, our policy is for a target of a 25% fund balance. However, we still remain conservative in our revenue forecasting and in our expenditure requests. So when we look at, you've seen this one before, property and sales taxes. Basically what I'm trying to show is it goes back from fiscal year 2016 and then out to 2022. But you'll see there's been some fluctuations, but for the most part, it's relatively consistent. The property taxes declined in 2018 due to a reduction in debt service payments. And so the blue line is showing property taxes if you didn't factor in the debt service. So you can see property taxes relatively flat. And then the sales tax line, gray, had that big jump. Well, it kind of looks blue on this screen, sorry. In 2019, which is the addition of the 0.5% non-home rule sales tax that was passed by referendum. Again, another slide you may have seen in the past. So this basically shows the relationship between the equalized assessed valuation, also known as the EAV, and the city's property tax rate. As the EAV increases, the property tax rate tends to decrease. I would also be remiss if I did not mention the city's portion of the property tax bill is currently at approximately 6.5 cents per dollar, meaning that a home with a market value of $350,000 would pay approximately $650 annually to the city for their property taxes. So if you think about what you pay in property taxes, you all know what your bill is. If you are a $350,000 home, roughly $650 of that is what comes back to the city. To put this in further context, the city estimates receipt of about $5.1 million in property taxes, and the estimated expenditures for the fire department alone are about the same amount. So again, the general fund funds police, fire, public works, economic development, community development, streets, fleets, all of that, and of which property tax is one component of $650 annually for an average size house, or $5 million. Our other major revenues in the general fund rely on our telecommunication taxes, utility taxes, building permits, and income tax. With the telecommunication tax, we've seen a lot of fluctuation. It looks relatively stable here, but what you'll know is the telecommunication tax was originally a tax on the actual phone, the landline, and now that we've gone to cell phones, they start bundling things. So they bundle your data plan, they bundle your internet. We only get the tax on the actual phone portion of that bill. So if a landline used to cost $50 a month and the cell phone call portion is $20 a month, there's a loss of $30 of taxable fees per month. Utility taxes is constantly changing because it's based upon Mother Nature. If we have a hot summer, the revenues increase due to increased electric and water consumption. And there may also be a slight increase due to the change in water rates. Building permits have started to increase since the recession, and then they're kind of flattening out here. And then income tax, there was a decrease in 2017 due to economic conditions. And again, those are flattening out. So kind of what I'm showing is that although we are financially sound and we have some good revenue streams, they're all pretty much now at a point where it's relatively consistent. So we kind of know what we're bringing in and it's staying consistent. Of course, there's always the other side of the equation. So there are the expense trends. Expense trends can stay level or they tend to go up. Not necessarily through anything we do, just because of contracts and other things. So as we talked about, we actually had a couple work sessions on this. We heard from our actuary. One of our large expenses that we do see increasing is the annual pension expense, specifically in our public safety pensions. So in fiscal year 2016, the annual pension expense for police was $1.1 million. That number for fiscal year 21 is estimated to be $1.75 million. The annual pension expense for fire has grown from $355,000 to $800,000. However, just last month, the General Assembly approved the Governor's Pension Consolidation Proposal, which will consolidate the public safety investment funds for all of these downstate and suburban pensions. While this isn't the cure-all, we do believe it is an important first step in seeing better return on investment. So the newly consolidated fund will operate similarly to that of the IMRF, which is all of our employees are covered under that who are not part of the public safety pension funds. You'll note, though, although the green line IMRF has been relatively stable, you see a little tick up. The contribution rate for IMRF is increasing January 1st from 9.24% to 11.4%. While this seems like a large jump, I would note that over the last 5 years, our average has been right around 11.4%. So we are at a high of about 12.8%. We've come down to a low of 9.2%, and now we're back to kind of where we've been at 11.4%. Again, just for informational purposes, as of today, on the payroll, we have 112 IMRF covered employees. We have 34 police pension employees, and we have 22 fire pension employees. So again, put those numbers in perspective. When you're looking at the police pension, 1.7 million covering, granted it's retired and current, but not a large population. This is just, again, a chart you've seen before, but contributions as a percent of pensionable payroll. To give you an example, if you have an employee making $50,000, if that employee is a police officer, $21,000 would be contributed towards the police pension. If that employee was a firefighter, $14,000 would be contributed towards pension. And if that employee, let's say, was a snowplow driver, worked in our street maintenance division, the city would be paying $4,600 for their pension. So once we have the revenues estimated and we have an understanding of personnel expenses, the departments start preparing their operational and capital budget requests, all the while keeping in mind the priorities established by the City Council at the Strategic Planning Workshop. So the City Council, again along with the SPAC representative, identified 4 major priorities for fiscal year '21. These include objectives relating to economic vitality, environmental stewardship, and strong governance. There were also other topics identified that may need further exploration through policy discussions. And again, I'm not going to read those out loud. They're all in the strategic plan, but we went through an exercise to prioritize those. So again, what are you expecting? When you see the budget for the first time in early 2020, what are you going to expect? This is just an overview, so I know I didn't give you a lot of the nitty-gritty details, and some of you are probably like, I want to know more, I want to know more. You'll get to know more. We anticipate that the recommended draft budget will be available to the City Council on or about January 6th. That is our target date. And included with this draft, we anticipate the following. We are planning to request for an additional police officer. The City Code provides for 27 police officers. While that was approved in 2006, the department has been operating with 26 police officers since 2007. Then the position was never filled because we had the economic downturn, and instead of filling a position and having to be concerned with laying that off, we've left it vacant. The addition of 1 officer would allow for a more effective use of officers handling traffic issues within the community. The City Council will have the opportunity to discuss and accept or reject the request. There was also a request from the Mental Health Board to increase their funding. I think you also heard from them on December 2nd when they were talking, and we mentioned this at strategic planning. They request an increase in funding from $155,000 to $200,000. In reviewing the levy history of the Mental Health Board, the high contribution they received was in 2008 of $193,500. However, the average levy since inception has been approximately $169,000. The recommendation at this time would be to increase their funding from $155,000 to $177,500. Ultimately, again, the City Council can accept, amend, or reject this request. Any additional funding for the Mental Health Board is derived directly from the property tax levy and therefore from the general fund. It should be noted that there were also other requests for an increase in funding from beautification, Cultural Arts Committee, but at this time we're not recommending any increases, but we'll provide more information on that at the January 13th to discuss. You will notice an increase in the transfer from the general fund to capital equipment. This is again due to the need of replacing older equipment. You may recall earlier this year, we entered into an agreement with Enterprise to start a test program of leasing vehicles as opposed to buying them outright. While everything appeared to make sense on paper, we're still waiting for our first vehicle. However, just today, breaking news in today, apparently we have 4 vehicles that will be delivered by the end of the week, and I think there's another 2 that are at the outfitter, so we are starting to see the vehicles, but we're concerned because Enterprise can't guarantee that the vehicles we ordered will be here by the end of the fiscal year. If they're not here by the end of the fiscal year, then that changes everything again, and we had budgeted the lease payments. So for the next year, we're looking at taking a break from the leasing so that we can see how that test program works, and we will be recommending the purchase of some vehicles. And then certainly we'll just take a pause and we may revisit that again in the future once we can compare how the years go. Wages have been budgeted either based upon contractual agreements with our union contracts or based upon the compensation plan that the council adopted a couple years ago. But overall, I believe that you're going to see a relatively flat budget, meaning not big increases, not big changes. Revenue is relatively flat, expenditures are relatively flat, not fat. But again, I've just kind of done the first pass. I've had meetings with all of the department heads, and I think that's in our next slide. So we first had the strategic planning kickoff meeting, so that's complete. Then the month of November, I was meeting with staff along with Assistant City Administrator McCready, Finance Manager Rita Cruz, who's here this evening, and Accounting Supervisor Jennifer Malewski. Each department sits down, they meet with us, they present their budgets, we go line by line. They have to justify any increases in any of the line items, any staffing requests, any capital requests. So now what's happening now is Rita and I and Ben we're kind of going through those numbers and seeing what makes sense and seeing how the budget balances. And then on Tonight, we're presenting the introduction overview to City Council, so I get to put a check mark there. I like checking off my boxes. And then by January 6th, we hope to be able to present you with the draft budget. Again, it's just a draft budget. It's a recommendation from staff based upon listening to you all at the strategic planning throughout our meetings and what we believe is a good balanced budget. We are scheduled to hold a special committee of the whole on January 13th. So at this point, you will have had the budget for at least a week. And this is an opportunity where you can ask any questions you want, make recommendations, make any changes. We're also asking, like we've done in the past, if you have questions as you're reviewing the budget, feel free to submit those questions so that we can prepare responses and we can also post those to the website. And then after the 13th, if we decide you still need more information or still want to see something different, there is still time to have another meeting either the following week on a regular city council night, or we can reserve that January 27th date, which is a fourth Monday, for another budget meeting. And then you'll see we're requesting that the public hearing for the fiscal year 21 budget and budget adoption be held on February 3rd. In fact, that action is on the agenda tonight for you to take. And then once again, you would see a preview of fiscal year 22, but you would only be adopting fiscal year 21. So again, I know it's very high level, but quite frankly, this budget year was relatively, dare I say, easy at the start, because again, it is a refresh of what we've already seen, and we're in a good financial position, so fortunately, we're able to fund some of the programs and priorities that the council identified. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer any, but stay tuned and you'll have all the information you've ever wanted and then some.
Questions or comments for the city administrator from the dais in the spirit of the high-level review? Alderman McGowan?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, one thing that I would like to mention is that I'm really hoping that the city can fully fund the mental health board, and I would just like to ask that that issue be explored further or explained further, not now, but, you know, in the coming months, because I'd like to know, I guess in more detail, what the mental health board, or how they came about the numbers that they presented to city staff, and what it will mean to the mental health board and to the community if the city is not able to fully fund their anticipated budget. So that is a concern of mine, and I know it's been discussed as a priority to try to help with mental health initiatives in the community. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Dawkins.
Thank you.
Item 4, ladies and gentlemen, amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments this evening? Item 5 is the omnibus agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are considered to be routine by this council, and they can be considered and voted upon with one motion. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion.
Second.
Alderman Marks makes the second. This is an item 5, the consent agenda. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Ruby.
Aye.
Haven.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Oladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Item 5 passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We skip down to item number 9A, recommend setting the fiscal year 2020-21 budget public hearing for Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Is there a motion to set that hearing as stated?
So moved.
Motion by Swanson, seconded by Bruno. Questions or comments? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 9B is to recommend approval of ordinance number 2019-43, extending the cable franchise agreement with Comcast of Illinois/Ohio/Oregon, LLC, to May 21st, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Alderman Marks makes the motion.
Second.
Alderman Clemens, who I vowed not to call on because of the sweater, made the second. Do not adjust your television, ladies and gentlemen. That's
But it's green.
Any questions or comments?
Do you want any background or?
Oh, yes, Ms. Dawkins, some background, forgive me.
So Comcast currently holds a franchise with the City of Geneva that authorizes them to operate and maintain a cable television system. The term of the original grant of the franchise commenced on March 19, 1984, and was renewed in December 2009 for a 10-year term expiring on December 20th, 2019. While negotiations have begun on a renewal agreement, they have not yet been completed, and the ordinance presented this evening will grant an extension of the franchise agreement through May 21st, 2020. Although the request is for a 5-month extension, it is the desire and belief of both parties that a renewal agreement will be completed as soon as possible. There was also some questions that we posted on the website today regarding this item. I think it would be interesting to note that when the franchise was renewed in 2009, it actually expired in 2001, and it was extended every year until 2009. So I believe the idea of a 5-year extension is not, 5-month extension is not out of the realm, and there's also been some changes in federal law that they want to explore before we renew the franchise. So if there are any additional questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions or comments from the dais for the administrator? Hearing none, seeing none. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Caven.
Aye.
Item 9B passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. Item number 10, municipal bills for payment. We kindly ask our city clerk to read the bills in their aggregate for our consideration.
Total bills are $3,657,173.98.
Mayor, I move that we approve and pay the bills as read. The individual items that add up to that amount can be found in tonight's packet on the city website.
Alderman Bruno makes the motion to pay the bills as presented, which are also available on the city's website and in each council member's packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ruby. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Caven.
Aye.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Item 10 passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. That brings us to item 11, Committee of the Whole items of business. All items were considered under the consent agenda and passed accordingly. We jump to item number 13, new business public comment. Anyone joining us this evening? Any comments, questions, information? Yes.
Hi.
Good evening.
Evelyn Roth. I want to talk about the clay that was dumped on my yard 3 years ago on my former property, 520 Ray Street. I was gone at Christmas time to Sedona, Arizona, met my son there. We came home to discover tons of clay dumped in our yard. It looked like a freight train went through the yard. And I called the Geneva police. Penny came over and said there really wasn't anything she could do. I called the King County Sheriff, and I also talked to the neighbors across the street, the Muirs. They said they didn't see anything. However, it took a construction company 5 solid days of semi-trucks bumper to bumper in front of my property hauling the clay away, and it cost $33,000. So the reason I'm bringing this up, since I don't own the property anymore, is I think it's still a problem. And tonight I just want to say that I have an IEPA permit for the dumping of the property for Elliott Construction. I also have a lab sample. It was fine. The pH was normal. There was nothing wrong. I don't know where the clay came from. I have my ideas. I'm not going to share them, but there wasn't, and it seems that the clay wasn't a problem. But I still out $33,000, and I wonder who did it. Okay, so I have the bills for that. The other thing that I want to bring up, these are just issues with my property. One is in April, Stephanie, I sent you a letter explaining how that house, 520 Ray Street, was not the Zimmerman house, how it was not landscaped by Jensen. I had all the deeds there First, I have a deed in 1921 of Thomas Fauntleroy giving the south half of the 18 acres, which would be from Meadows to Route 31, from Fargo to Ray, to his daughter, Catherine Fauntleroy Zimmerman. And he gave the north 8 acres to Robert Fauntleroy, which is where my house was. Then in the 1950s, Catherine and Herbert Zimmerman subdivided their property, which is here, into 5 pieces, and on Lot 3 remains the house, which belongs to Paul Duke today, 1210 South Batavia Avenue. He has the Zimmerman house, which was landscaped by Jens Jensen 3 times in the 1920s. So I'd sent you to that. I don't think you commented on it, but you can also see it better on the plat, a survey. This is an old plat from my property, and you can see to the south it says Zimmerman's First Addition to Geneva, which is the property below. That would be Paul Duke's house, the Zimmerman house. The other thing I want to bring up is I have an email here from Michael Lambert from November 13th. I think this was probably, I don't have a year on it, 3 years ago. And we talk about, is the property Jens Jensen or not? And he says, I suspect that the landscape was designed by some prominent landscape architect in 1906 to 1908. It is impossible to determine whom at this point. I have consulted with Julia Bachrach, a Jens Jensen expert whom I have known for years and who is a great admirer of Robert Greasy's work. I had already submitted to the City Council many times Robert Greasy's opinion, and her opinion agrees with his that this drawing is an existing conditions survey and impossible to determine who did the earlier work. In other words, the drawing that is there that says topographical survey, Fauntleroy House 1925, is just a topographical survey of what someone did previously. The house was built in 1907. So I have something that Michael Lambert says it's not Jens Jensen. I also have, I know there was talk, it was on the National Register. I have a email here from Michael Lambert, March 11th, 2019. And I asked him if he would tell me, because I wanted to hear it from him, was my house on the National Register or not? And he sort of said, Madeline, since January 2017, you've been informed repeatedly that your property is not now, never has been, and it's not being nominated covertly to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So he says it's not on it, which of course I knew it was not on it. And I have a letter here from 2017 from Rachel Levowitz, which I've already handed out. My last thing, I don't really want to identify on television, but could I just pass it around for everyone to look at and just see what it is, and then I could pick it up?
I think in the spirit of transparency, I think,
It's just a background check on someone?
well, I don't think the council should accept background checks on anyone. We are not in the business of checking people's backgrounds. I think it would be irrelevant.
It's an issue.
It's an issue to you respectfully, Mrs. Roth, but it's certainly not to us. If the council overrules me, or if the city attorney wishes to opine, that's fine, but,
Okay.
okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
It is an issue.
If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and we will jump quickly into the Board of Appeals meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Offered by Alderman Marks. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. I will give the clerk all of 7 seconds.
I'll need all of it.
Where's Ellie?
Ladies and gentlemen, I
Where's Ellie?
proud to call the Board of Appeals meeting to order. Let the record show that all the council members are present. Our issue this evening is to approve minutes from the March 25th, 2019 Board of Appeals meeting. Is there a motion? Motion by McGowan, seconded by, was that Mr. Marks? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Our item of business this evening, item 3A, is a hearing on the appeal by State and Third LLC of City of Geneva's fire code resistance rating requirements for west facade window improvements at 301 West State Street, Geneva, Illinois, 60134. Is there a motion to put this on the floor? Motion by Alderman Clemens,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Bruno.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask for an amendment to the agenda, only because I think it'll make everybody's life simpler? And could we actually put, I don't know what item it is, but the 10 North 3rd Building north facade up first?
B and C.
That's B and,
Yeah, you can flip them around.
anyone object to the deviation from the agenda as written?
I think it'll just make it
So approved.
simpler for everybody.
No problem. And Mr. Finson, you have the floor then?
Yes, thank you.
We are discussing item B and C together. Or do you want them separated?
We need to do them separately.
Separate it is.
Sorry about that.
C is
Yep, we're doing C then. No, the motioner concurs, the seconder concurs. Item C is to go first tonight? Yes. Without objection? Excellent.
Sorry about that. Yeah, this gets, I don't want to confuse you. First of all, my name is Scott Finson. I'm one of the city's attorneys. And we're here tonight to look at an appeal. And so just generally, what happened is the applicants, who are Rachel Greider and Andrew Greider, they actually own two different LLCs. And so the first LLC that we're talking about is 10 North 3rd Street LLC. And it actually owns that, space button. Thank you. If you, that looked better when I did it this morning. So they own, that LLC owns this building right here. And for those of you that are familiar with the Erdes property, as it's sort of commonly known for those of us that grew up here, you may think of that as one building and one property. When you look at, oh, sorry about that. Now
Or arrow.
thank you. That this is one building. It's actually, or one property. It's not, it's actually two properties. And the one we're talking about is this rectangle right here. That is the 10 North 3rd building, and that is owned by 10 North 3rd LLC. And the Greiders who are here tonight, they actually are the sole owners of that building. They're also the owner of this building as well, which is 301 West State. The one we're talking about first is this building, and in particular, we're talking about this wall along this building. So if you think about that, and we'll get to the drawing in a second, the issue that came up for staff is that right now this wall that sits on the north side of the property on the property line is just a solid wall. There are no windows there. The second floor is set back about 10 feet, maybe a little bit more than that. And so the question that the Greiders asked city staff is, can we go ahead and put these windows in, or what are the requirements? And city staff determined, Mr. Nelson and Mr. Schultze, along with the chief, determined that because this property, this wall, sits on the property line, our city code requires that there has to be a 3-hour rating for these 10 windows. And so you'll see that in the packet that was before you. And that with respect to these windows up on top, there's an existing transom in these two areas, and so they're putting some new windows in. And with respect to those items, they each required a 1-hour fire resistance rating. The concern that the Greiders had is that a 1-hour or a 3-hour fire resistance rating for these windows is extremely expensive. They're also not terribly attractive, as I understand it. In order to get there, they're fairly small. And so the question was there something that could be done in terms of relief to allow them to put in basically windows that have a 0 rating? And as you may recall from the last time I was here, the city staff does not have that authority. And so in my view, the city staff's opinions with respect to what our ordinance requires is correct. But they did present to us some alternatives, and part of the alternatives that they were going to put in there were, number one, that we're going to have this building and the other building completely sprinklered. We're also going to have fire alarms, and they agreed, backspace, that if something was ever built in this parking lot, that they would be willing to seal up those windows. And the reason that what we were trying to look for is an opportunity that would allow us to improve the fire situation there through the sprinklers, but it also takes into account the fact that there's a parking lot there. And as a practical matter, that parking lot, I think I've lived here since 1975, that parking lot has been there the whole time, and unless we decide that we're going to waive the parking fees, there's no way anybody's likely to build there. And so we wanted to reflect the reality of the situation, which would be if we were more than 30 feet from the property line, then we could have windows in there that would have absolutely no ratings. So the Griders worked with city staff, and they talked about, well, what would be the options? And if you look at in your packet for the first one, the proposal that they made is for an alternative fire prevention method. Essentially involved a couple of things. Number one, that they would install a fire alarm system for this building. Number two, they would install a fire suppression system, so sprinklers for this building. Number three, they would agree that if at any point in time that fire alarm or sprinkler system was not maintained, that the city could come in and cause them to comply with whatever the future codes are in terms of those holes essentially in that wall. They also agreed that with respect to 301 West State Street, and this is where it gets a little confusing, this particular, the entity that owns this building does not own the other building. So theoretically, somebody could sell one of the buildings but not the other. And so they agreed that 301 West State has to install a fire suppression system and a fire alarm system. And if any point in the future, if they fail to do that, we could cause them to brick up those windows as well. Finally, they agreed that they will record, it's going to be a memorandum that identifies in the land records that this is what was agreed to if this appeal is granted. So that any future owner, if something were to happen 20 years from now, any future owner would be on notice that if these conditions are not maintained, that the city could cause them at their expense to brick up those windows or bring it into compliance. And so after reviewing all of those items, we explained to them, or staff explained to them, that the staff does not have the authority to grant the relief that they're looking for, which is to basically make all of these zero-rated windows, even though the staff agrees that this is an appropriate alternative. And we said the only way that that can happen is if they appeal it, they bring it to you all, and you all find that it is an equal or better fire prevention method. Their appeal is supported by their architect, Dan Marshall, who, in his opinion, agrees that this is an equal or better solution. And so with that, the issue tonight is, do you all agree that this is an equal or better solution? And if so, you grant the relief, and then we would move on to the next one.
On item C, ladies and gentlemen, any questions or comments for either the attorney, Mr. Finson, and/or the architect, and/or the builder, and/or the applicant? Alderman Bruno, Alderman Clements?
It seems logical. The only thing I'd wondered, and I think this is probably for staff, is so if the parking lot parcel gets sold and developed, is that notation somehow on the property for that parcel that triggers it? Is there something that automatically, if the parking lot gets developed, unlikely, do we automatically look at the neighboring parcel to see that this has been triggered to brick that in?
I can answer that. Yeah, the short answer is hopefully our staff would know, but we intentionally did not put anything on the parking lot parcel. And the reason is that that parcel, the entity that owns that, they can develop their property as they see fit.
Okay.
And the fact that this property owner is asking for this relief, it's on them, it's incumbent on them that they're taking the risk. So if for some reason somebody came in and said, look, we're going to develop that property, we're going to put a building right up against to it, the Griders understand that that is their risk, and at that point the city would then look at their property and say, okay, what do we need to do, if anything, to make sure that this is safe? Does that?
Mostly, but isn't it also if there's a non-fire rated wall, is that not a burden or a risk to the new developer?
I would say no, because the way we put this in is that the burden is on this landowner.
Well, there's risk, though, that they're developing, they could be assuming that their neighboring property is fully compliant for fire resistance. I just want to be comfortable that we've got some trigger, no matter which.
One of the things this board, and you're serving as a board tonight, needs to resolve is whether the solution offered by the applicant and supported by staff is equal to or greater than the current solution. So there wouldn't be necessarily any added risk, assuming that standard were deemed met.
Got it. And with sprinkling, we've kind of
Yeah,
cracked that nut.
as city staff looked at this, one of the long-standing objectives in the downtown area has been to get those buildings that are older sprinkled. The concern was, I'm guessing, but it probably goes back to the Kaiser fire, and which was a long time ago, and the fear was that the whole block could go. And so I think long before the current chief, that had been sort of the view, and we see this as an opportunity to accomplish that objective. And the chief can correct me on this, but I think with respect to that block, we come pretty close to having all of the buildings sprinkled on State Street.
On that block, all but one building between Third and the alley going towards Fourth will be sprinkled.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Clark Griswold, Clements, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to make sure, I did read all of this in the packet. It all seems to make sense. I just want to make absolutely certain, since I'm certainly no expert in fire prevention or suppression, I want to hear it from the fire guys. This is, in your opinion, as good or better than what the code required?
It is as good or better with a sprinkler and an alarm system over what's currently there than
And what would otherwise be required by the code?
required, right?
Okay. Because I think this is also important as we are going to have, this isn't going to be a one-off kind of thing as we're working on these buildings. I think there's going to be a lot of, unless we dig into our code and make changes, so.
Stay tuned,
Yeah,
that'll be
that
on
seems like-
January 13th as well.
Excellent. All right. Very good. Thank you very much.
Alderman McGowan.
Thank you. Chief Antonori, I also have a question for you, if you don't mind. As far, do you or the Geneva Fire Department foresee any problems if the parking lot is developed in any manner in the future? Like, do you foresee any situations that would make things difficult for fire safety?
We would have to look at the proposed plan if and when it's ever developed and apply the codes at the time to what would have to be done. So, remembering that if somebody develops a building on that property, they're also obligated to hold a certain fire protection on their building. And, that's something that would be worked out if and when it's ever developed.
Okay, thank you.
Don't see any problems at all, no.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the dais? Alderman Kilberg.
Could you quantify what the economic hardship is, the differential between what's before us this evening as a proposal versus what the economic impact or what the cost would be as it relates to complying with the code as it's currently written?
I'll let them do. One thing I can say, Alderman Kilberg, is one of the things that came up early on was that they had come to the city and said that they wanted to sprinkle the building. And what I was told, and Kathleen can correct me, is that that is not something that was required. That was their choice. And,
Understood.
But had they had to put in 3-hour glass, that would have, my understanding is that would have altered their decision-making with respect to whether or not they were going to sprinkle the buildings. But I'll let them answer the question.
The reason I ask is that we've had before us claims of economic hardship in trying to weigh the differential, I think is helpful in as it relates at least to my rendering a decision on the matter. Obviously, fire department's fine with it, building inspector's fine with it. I'm just wondering though, for the public though, because we've reached decisions where we said that the economic hardship wasn't enough to comply with the code of the city. So, do you have any kind of numbers that you might be able to share?
Whoever wishes to speak, I would invite you to the podium, please, and just share your name with us.
The reason I ask is because we've asked other people to provide us with that information.
Right.
So,
So as it relates specifically to this.
Madam,
North-
if I could interrupt you just to
I'm
share your
sorry.
name, please.
I'm Rachel Greider, manager of 10 North 3rd LLC. And as it relates to the 10-hour or the 3-hour glass, it's only available in 10-inch by 10-inch size windows. And so when we were actually looking at purchasing this building for the use of my husband's business office, one of the things that was a requirement for us that we would be able to hopefully put in larger windows than that, because as you can imagine, a 10-inch by 10-inch window does not provide the light or the feel that you'd want for your employees. I do know 1-hour rated glass is, I think Brian Hogan gave us a quote for one window, $2,600. And a standard window is, so, and on this wall, there's, I'm trying to think, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 windows. So, and the cost to sprinkle is much greater than that. But when we were looking at this and as a decision to what to present to you, we saw sprinkling as a real life-saving fire suppression system, and putting in fiberglass was not a great option. So that's why we're presenting this as our alternative.
so you were saying about 5X,
Yeah.
and you would have as many square inches of window opening.
From our standpoint, the 3-hour rated glass would decrease the value of the building significantly. So we're looking at it from that perspective.
The only other point I would make, and I appreciate the question about whether or not, sort of the economic hardship question, but in terms of what you're deciding, economic hardship isn't actually a relevant factor. The only factor is, on this particular appeal, is the solution that's presented equal to or better than what's required by our code? And so I appreciate, and I provided that as background, but I think it's important that we make that distinction, because if somebody were to come before us in the future and say, I have this incredible economic hardship, and yet they could not get to a point where it was equal to or better than, we would not be in a position to grant that relief, and we would give that opinion if that's what we thought the situation was.
I believe in 2019, we've already had a situation, though, where this was an issue as related to economic hardship, as related to fire suppression. That's the reason why I asked the question.
In that particular, beer cellar?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the beer cellar case, again, I think the economic impact, whether or not a business may just choose to come or whether or not they can use the property for its purpose, they're explaining sort of the rationale for what they're doing. But in that particular case, again, we had city staff coming forward and saying that they thought it was an acceptable solution, and in that particular case, we also had the architect come forward and provide testimony that in their expert opinion, it was equal to or better than.
But I know that economic hardship did enter into the discussion that evening, though.
It was a discussion, but I don't remember exactly what I said.
You're saying it wasn't relevant.
It wasn't relevant.
Thank you.
That's right. It was not relevant.
Anyone else? Questions or comments on item, I believe it's 3C for Mr. Finson and/or any of the applicants, architects, or builder present? On the motion and the second, Mr. Clerk, please take the roll. This is item 3C, ladies and gentlemen. This is concerning the city's fire code resistance rating requirements for the north facade window and door improvements at 10 North 3rd Street.
We have a motion and
We do. We have a motion and a second. Motion's offered by Clemens, a second by Bruno.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Caven.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Item 3C passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We will jump to item 3B, hearing of the appeal by 10 North 3rd Street LLC of the city's fire code resistance rating requirements for the south facade window and door improvements at 10 North 3rd Street, Geneva 60134. Is there a motion? Motion by Alderman Marks. Seconded by Alderman Burkhart. This matter's on the floor. Mr. Finson?
Okay. So this time, it's a little bit different scenario, and these get increasingly more complicated, so that's why I asked that we go in the order that we're going in. So again, we're dealing with the same building, but we're now dealing with windows and a door. So the door is here. There's a little sort of jag in the wall there, and the windows we're talking about are along this wall. This yellow area, there is a 10-foot easement that is in this yellow area. Importantly, that easement does not go to the 10 North 3rd building, so they don't control that easement. However, that easement is controlled by the 301 West building. It's relevant because if somebody were to say, I don't want the easement anymore, it theoretically could go away. And as you all know, there's a lot of activity going on right here in this area with the construction that's going on with Nobel House. The other thing is that particular easement, as best I can tell, is actually, there's more than one property that has access to that easement, which makes it relevant, so it's not just one party that could say, I don't want the easement anymore. So, in terms of this particular building, so the replacement door, which would be here, is actually 10 feet off the property line. And because it's 10 or more feet, we have to have 1 hour glass. The replacement windows, my eyes are getting a little old, here, sorry, bear with me here, and up top, these windows are on the property line, and so they would require 3-hour fire resistance rating. The new windows, which are located here, are on the property line, and so they would require a 3-hour fire resistance rating as well. The windows up here are actually concealed by siding, and so they're going to take the siding off but not touch the windows. And the reason we wanted to, you may say, well, why does that matter if there's nothing that has to be done? The reason is that because they're removing the siding, we want to make it clear as long as they don't touch the windows, change them in any way, it's the position of the city that they can stay even though they are non-conforming. Because they're not, but if they were to touch those windows in the future, then we would need to come back and address whether or not anything needs to be done with respect to those windows. In terms of what they want to do, they would like to make this all 0-hour fire resistance rating. Again, it's the position of city staff that because we are going to have sprinkling in this building and the adjacent building, and because we have the 10-foot easement there that ensures minimum separation between this building and the other building, that collectively, and we also have the requirement that if anything were to change physically in the future, either because the property came closer or because the sprinkling systems in either the buildings weren't installed or weren't operable, that we could then revisit the issue. City staff is recommending that we approve the requested appeal, which is that all of the windows here and the door would be 0.
Questions or comments for the attorney, for Mr. Marshall, Mr. Hogan, and/or the applicants regarding this particular item, item 3B? Alderman Burkhart.
Thank you. When you say touch the existing windows, do you mean like take them out to renovate, or?
If they were to renovate them, if they were to do anything at all to them that physically altered the windows themselves, and Eric Nelson can speak to it better than I can, but my understanding is that if they were to change them in any way, put new glass in, any sort of physical change to those windows would then trigger the question of whether or not they need to be brought into conformity with the existing code.
So if they were to come in and apply for a permit to replace that window with a vinyl window, with an aluminum window, then would they have to come into full compliance? Now, if a pane broke, something that wouldn't require a permit, then we let them replace the pane.
Okay.
Maintenance, painting, tuck point, caulking, whatever, that's all maintenance. That doesn't require a permit.
Very good. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Alderman Burkhart, floor is still yours. Anything else?
Chief Antonori, can you explain fire-resistant glass and what is that? What is the goal with fire-resistant glass and the difference between a 1-hour rating and a 3-hour rating? And I mean, what does it matter if if the roof's on fire or the side of a house is on fire, why is the glass such a?
Well, in a commercial building, the resistance rating, say 1 hour, says it can take direct flame for 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours. So let's say a building was close to it, and this building catches on fire. The glass would hold, you know, a normal wall's 3 hours, but when you penetrate the wall, the maximum penetration means that the best protection is 3 hours. So the code is designed for how close buildings are to each other, what you need. So 1 hour would break, in 1 hour a 0 rating will fail fairly early. So they're really designed, you know, it's the structure of the glass, how big it is, how many layers, that type of thing. So the 3 hour would be, the closer the other building is, the more rating you'd want on the penetrations of the wall.
In a building like this, though, that's built a century ago, I mean, what would the wall rating be I mean, I'm just wondering.
At least 3 hours.
You think even now
The
that
wall
would be?
The wall unpenetrated would hold. Now, if there's cracks in it, eaves, that type of thing. So the idea, though, since there is a sprinkler on the inside, if a window does fail, the sprinkler will hold, the alarm will go off, will come, put the fire out.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else on the dais? Alderman McGowan?
Thank you. Have there been any objections from any of the neighboring building owners along Route 38 that kind of back up to that easement area?
Any objections, Mr. Attorney?
None that I'm aware of, but it'd probably be Kathleen.
And all of those property owners were like duly notified of this?
Well, I can answer that question, but I'll defer to the city, or excuse me, one of the attorneys for the city to answer it specifically.
They received the notice that all citizens received, which was the publication of this agenda.
Okay. And then I guess I just have one more question for Chief Antonore, and that is, even with the fire suppression system installed, with 0-hour windows along that south-facing wall, is there any increased risk to the adjacent buildings that back up to the easement?
To the other buildings or the building in question?
Not the building in question, but let's say it was really dry and windy and there was a fire that spread quickly and the windows quickly failed, and then something like, you know, sparks flew across the easement and landed on the back of Nobel House or something like that. Just
No different
hypothetically
than
speaking.
today. You know.
Sorry, what?
No different than today. So if that building caught on fire today, the risk is higher today without sprinklers than it would be tomorrow with sprinklers.
True.
So that the future is a less risky environment between the two buildings.
Okay.
And, you know, because of the development on Noble House, I know it's not part of the topic, but the two new buildings, the new building they bought, they're going to renovate, the building next to that, and then 301, other than the original Nobel House, all those buildings are now going to be sprinkled over the near term,
Okay. Thank you.
which helps, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the dais? On item 3B, as in boy, we do have a motion, we do have a second. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
Munson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Haven.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Item 3 passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. We jump to, in reverse order, of course, item 3A, hearing on the appeal by State and Third LLC of the city's fire code resistance rating requirements for the west facade, window improvements at 301 West State Street. Is there a motion? So moved. Motion by Alderman Marks,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Bruno. And according to the attorney, this is the most complicated of the three, but we have trust in your linguistic ability to make it oh so simple.
It sounded much simpler in my brain before I started talking. So 301 West is this building. The west facade is here. And what makes this complicated is, unlike the other buildings, there is a portion of the 301 West building that is directly adjacent, so face-to-face with the Nobel House. And then there's this little jag, and then you have sort of an opening, and you've got sort of different levels that are going on there. And you'll see that in the next drawing. So what they are doing currently, and this is, I think, important for everybody to understand. Currently, these two windows, which are directly above Nobel House, those two windows are 0 rating, as it is. And if they don't touch them, which they're not going to touch, there is nothing that needs to be done. And so that, in terms of existing fire hazard, has been there since, well, at least since you were born, probably. And
Care to comment exactly how old that was?
1964, thereabouts. So that's already there. They're not going to touch those two windows. With respect to these two windows, they're going to actually reduce the opening, but they would like to see a 0 rating here. With respect to these 3 windows, they're simply going to replace them. And so there's some back and forth in terms of how far they are away from each other. So with respect to window number 1, lose track here. With respect to window number 1, city code or staff found that should be a 1-hour fire resistance rating. Number 2 should be a 1-hour fire resistance rating. Number 3 should be a 3-hour fire resistance rating because it's on the line or within 5 feet of the line. Number 4 should be a 1-hour because it's further back. Number 5 should be a 3-hour because it comes closer to the property line again. And then with respect to 6 and 7, since they're not touching them, there is no action required again as long as they do not touch them. Again, because of the sprinkler system that is going to go into both buildings, and because they're agreeing that if there are physical changes to the properties, that we can revisit this issue, city staff has found that with respect to items number 1, 2, and 1 and 2, that they are okay with a 0 fire resistance rating. With respect to item 3, that should be a 1-hour fire resistance rating. With respect to number 4, that would be a 0 fire resistance rating. And with respect to number 5, that would be a 1-hour fire resistance rating. And again, as long as these 2 are not touched, then there is no action required.
Questions or comments for the attorney? Alderman McGowan?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because I'm looking at the building on Google Maps, is there some type of addition that currently exists over some of these windows that will be removed? And in other words, are all of these windows along the original brick wall of the building?
Let's Dan.
Mr. Marshall, just for the record, introduce yourself and.
My name is Dan Marshall from Marshall Architects.
Thank you, sir.
All the buildings, all the windows that you're seeing are currently there.
So is there some type of addition now that's going to be removed?
No, there's a kind of a shed, right? It's just to the right of window 5. It's a kind of an old porch shed that's there. And it's not going to be removed.
Okay.
It's existing.
Can you tell me, if I say windows 2 and 3, we're talking about the same ones?
Oh, there it is. That's
That's the shed, but going to windows 2 and 3, what is the difference, I guess, in distance facing west?
Sure, right here, that's window 3 in the plan.
Can you go to the red windows, because that's sort of what I was looking
So
at?
right, that red window there is that window right there.
Oh, okay.
So that's the distance.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it changes, is because this window here is stepped back farther.
Yes.
It's hard to tell in elevation, but in floor plan you can see it. That's the difference. That's why they would like this one to be 1 hour, and this one's allowed to be 0 hours.
Okay. I'm still a little confused with, but it's just a matter of looking what's on the aerial image, which
Okay.
maybe isn't,
Perfect, yeah.
well, not perfect, but it may not be completely current, but I don't know why it wouldn't be, because I don't think anyone's really done major construction on this
Do you
building.
want me to look at your aerial?
Yeah, could you?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just because I need clarification on, so, or if you wanted to pull it up on the computer on the big screen, but, sorry, now I've like lost where it is, here. Just like, I was looking, it's hard to see, but it looks like that little shed there.
That's the shed that I pointed to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the existing shed.
But, it looks like, I'll zoom in. This is like window 1, window 2, and then window 3, and these two seem to be lined up here, but,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah, like this
That's
looks like a
window-
big addition.
Yeah, this is a porch right
Mm-hmm.
here. And those two, there's 4 and 5 are tucked back.
So
back
they're
of this
along
wall.
that brick wall.
Yes,
So is
yeah.
this going to be removed?
No, that's all staying there.
Oh, okay.
Just for the benefit of everyone else, Mr. Marshall or Alderman McGowan, if you could just clarify what was stated there so that we know. I believe it's
Gladly.
moving the entire building to Batavia. Doing the,
So Alderman McGowan's question was about this porch that's actually here. You can see the roof on the aerial. And so it kind of hides these two windows here. You can't see on the aerial because they're set back behind the porch roof.
And the window number 3 as well, correct?
Window 3 you could see in your aerial. That's not in the porch. What you couldn't see in the aerial is this window number 1 either, because that's set way back.
Are windows 2 and 3 on the diagram on the overhead approximately the same distance? Like, are they kind of are pretty much in line with each other?
I'm sorry, 2 and 3 you said?
Yes.
I lost the mouse again.
No, they're
No. 3 is out farther, that's this one. 2 is set back.
And is window number 3 covered behind a shed as well?
No. No, that's exposed. And I could see that on your aerial.
Oh, because when I was looking on the aerial, I didn't see that. but
Well,
it's
I
okay.
think you probably couldn't see number 1 or number 2. It's kind of set back, so when you counted them, you couldn't see it, but it's there.
Yeah. Okay.
anyone else on the dais? This is item 3A. We have a motion by Marks. We have a second by, good Lord, Bruno. Mr. Clerk, when you're ready, please take the roll.
McGowan.
I'm going to abstain.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Caven.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Maladra.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye. City Attorney would like to comment regarding Alderman McGowan's
Do
abstention.
you want to vote, or are you declining to vote? Okay. It's still.
The item passes with 9 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, 0 absent, and 1 declining to do so. That wraps up the meeting of the Board of Appeal. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman Marks makes the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Microphones are turned off. We'll reassemble the troops, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a committee of the whole meeting to attend to. We also have a closed session this evening. Without further ado, I would call the committee of the whole meeting to order. Let the record show that all the council members are present for this committee of the whole meeting. Item 2 is to approve regular committee of the whole minutes from December 2, 2019. Is there motion by Kilberg, seconded by Swanson? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Items of business. Item 3A is to consider approval of draft ordinance creating a Class C5 micro winery license and approve issuance of one Class C5 license to Geneva Winery LLC at 426 South 3rd Street in beautiful bucolic Geneva.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Bruno.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Burkhart. Ms. Dawkins,
So Geneva Winery LLC submitted a liquor license application to allow for limited wine manufacturing as well as retail sale by the glass or bottle for consumption on or off premise at 426 South 3rd Street. The police department has submitted their background report on the applicant, and city staff has worked to create this new license classification to allow manufacturer retail sales on and off premise and wine club memberships as allowed by law. I also believe this evening Brent Copstead is owner of Geneva Winery, is present if there are any additional questions.
Questions or comments for either Mr. Copstead or City Administrator? Seeing none, hearing none, we have a motion by Kilberg, seconded by Bruno. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent.
I think I seconded it.
Oh, you did? Forgive me. Did you really? Do you want me to change the record then? I apologize. Yeah. What the hell are you doing there, Bruno? Edit the tape. People get mad at me for using that word. Okay. Sorry about that, Alderman Burkhart. Item 3B is to consider approval of draft resolution to reject Utility Dynamics bid for fiscal year 2019-2020 electric improvement contract. Is there a motion to reject as noted? Alderman McGowan, Alderman Burkhart makes the second.
That was not me.
We'll never call on Bruno again. Questions or comments for after a brief introduction by City Administrator Dawkins?
Okay, so bids were opened on December 5th for electric improvements in the block between 3rd Street, 4th Street, Hamilton, and State Street. We received one bid. Several of the contracts did reply that they were not able to bid due to current workloads. The bid that was received was higher than anticipated, and it is the desire of the utility to rebid the project in the spring when weather conditions should be more conducive to this type of construction work. Staff is requesting that the bid from Utility Dynamics Corporation be rejected and direct staff to rebid the project at a later date. Director Babica is here to answer any additional questions you may have.
Questions or comments for Director Babica regarding item 3B as in boy? Hearing none, seeing none, just a reminder, the motion is to reject the bid by Utility Dynamics, so an aye is to support the rejection of that bid. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Swanson.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Burkhart.
Aye.
Clements.
Aye.
Ruby.
Aye.
Haven.
Aye.
Kilberg.
Aye.
Olaja.
Aye.
Marks.
Aye.
McGowan.
Aye.
The motion is successful with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. Item 3C, folks, is to consider approval of the draft 2019 tax abatement ordinances as presented in your packet. Alderman Marks makes the motion. Alderman Clements makes the second. Questions or comments after the brief introduction by City Administrator Dawkins?
So as a supplement to the 2019 tax levy, the city annually abates taxes for various bond issues using electric and water wastewater revenues, mainly comprised of user fees. These alternative revenue bonds are required to be repaid by property taxes or by the user fees. This annual process removes the debt service payments from the property tax bill and then requires the bonds be paid from their respective funds. The total amount to be abated attributable to the electric fund is $2,069,800 and $335,525 from the water wastewater fund. Finance Manager Rita Cruz has stayed along all evening to answer any questions you might have regarding this item.
Any questions or comments for the Finance Manager, Ms. Cruz? Oh. Seeing none, hearing none, wondering why she hung out. All in favor of the abatements as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say nay. Item 3C passes with 10 affirmative votes, 0 nay votes, and 0 absent. Is there anybody who's still with us regarding public comment? Item 5 is closed session on collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session for that specific purpose. Motion by Alderman Swanson, seconded by Alderman Marks. I forget, Mr. City Attorney, roll call or voice vote sufficient? Voice vote, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll be back, no action being taken tonight, folks. We'll be back momentarily.